whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Martin Luther King. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I am your hostess, Shamisa Ali. Tonight, we will discuss the value of local content legislation. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the UK, Canada, the Caribbean, and Guyana. Funding support is by well-known philanthropist Dave Narine from Dave West Indian Imports. Our program tonight is moderated by former UG lecturer Dr. Tara Singh. Our speakers for tonight, Mr. Gopnath Bobby Gosai Jr. He is the Senior Petroleum Coordinator of the Ministry of Natural Resources, with a key responsibility for assisting with the development and implementation of the objectives of the Government of Guyana, which are embedded in the Petroleum Management Program for the economy. Our next speaker, Joel Bagwandin, is a financial and economic analyst who has been providing insights and analysis on Guyana's economic development, microfinance issues, and public policies for the last 5+ years. He is the holder of a master's degree in banking and finance with 15 years professional experience in banking and corporate finance. Our next speaker is Dave Narine, and he is the owner and CRO of Dave West Indian Imports. He is also a major philanthropist who has been donating generously to sports development as well as social welfare in Guyana. Welcome to all of you guys, and thank you for being here this evening. How's everyone doing this evening?
Good, thanks.
Dr. Tara?
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Shamisa. Welcome to the panel, Mr. Bobby Gusai, Joel Bangwadin, and Mr. Dave Narine. Today we should have a very interesting conversation on local content. But before we start, I'd ask Joel to highlight some of the main features of the NRF bill, because that is still creating some confusion in people's mind. I know it's indirectly linked to local content. So if Joel can please highlight some of the key features of the local content bill and say how it's different from the PNC version. If you can proceed, we'll appreciate that.
Guys, good evening. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So I'm back and forth with my internet connection is not the best on my computer. So I'm back on my mobile. My data seems to be working better. So Dr. Singh, your question is comparing the local content bill by the previous government versus the current one that we have. Well, there is no comparison. There was no, you can't compare nothing with something, right? So let me give you a little bit of background. When we discovered oil back in 2015, which was 2015 was the elections year, just for your diaspora audience and who might be new. 2015 was an elections year, and we had a change of government following that election. The private sector was calling for local content policy and eventually local content legislation. The government of the time would have, during that 5 years period, would have crafted three different draft policy, which I had the privilege of reviewing all three, and I would have written on all three. The first two, in summary, it was not a real policy. It read more like an academic paper. Divorced from pragmatism, divorced from the practical context of the economy and the our local private sector. So it was just a fictitious document. The third one, with the third draft, which was under the previous government, was even more insulting. I mean, sorry for using such harsh words, but I mean, I'm a very frank guy and I say things as it is, right? And why I'm saying that is because if you, and anybody could go and form their own opinion, right? and these documents are still accessible on the internet. If you go and look for the third version, the third draft local content policy, and you look on the very first page or the second page that speaks to the objective of the policy, right? It states that this policy only caters for the upstream sector at this time. Now, the document is probably 50 pages or 30 pages. Now, that one line alone means the entire document means nothing to Guyana. It means you got to put it in the garbage. Why? Because oftentimes I have said this, and many other professionals and analysts have said this, including our vice president, that one who understands our macroeconomic fundamentals and our capacity as we are a small economy. We have our pre-oil GDP was just 4 billion US dollars. The total assets in the banking sector is under 3 billion US. And the development cost for LISA phase one alone is 4.3 billion, almost equivalent to our pre-oil GDP back in 2019. So what does that mean? It means we as a country, we do not have the capacity, we do not have the financial wherewithal, we don't have the resources to compete in the upstream sector. If you take all the businesses in Guyana, right, and all the government money, it's not enough to go and develop or invest in the upstream sector. So that is why you need the multinational like ExxonMobil and the others, right? They have the resources, they have the financial capability to develop the upstream sector. So we got to understand the local content framework and how it will benefit Guyana. We have to understand the structure of the sector. And so the sector has three different there are three different aspects or three different categories. There is the upstream sector, which is the upstream activities that Exxon is undertaking, the exploration, the drilling, and the production of oil. Then there is the midstream sector. The midstream sector connects the downstream to the upstream, where you have in the midstream sector the support services, the infrastructure, shore-based facilities, storage and shipping and all these other things, welding and fabrication, all the other, midstream activities, right? And then there is the downstream sector. So for a local content policy to make sense, that policy has to be crafted around maximizing value, building capacity for the midstream sector, building infrastructure and so forth, and developing a downstream sector, not the upstream sector. So that is why I said, there is no comparison. Under the previous government, there was not, the policy wasn't sound, was divorced from the pragmatic context, and we didn't even reach the legislation stage. Fast forward to 2020, the first thing when President Ali was sworn in, I could remember vividly. I think it was a Sunday. The very next day following his swearing-in ceremony, he asked to meet with the private sector, all the private sector. And so there was a wide consultation, and one of the things top on the agenda was COVID. And then he, within a matter of days, following that consultation with the private sector, put together a local content committee. And that committee had people like Sham Nokta, Carl Greenwich, I think Kevin Ramnarine, Bobby, was Kevin Ramnarine on it, and Paul, and Anthony Paul. So that committee was given a task to now engage with the private sector to have a series of consultations and what the private sector would like to see in this local content, framework. And I could speak confidently and without fear of conviction because I was, at that time, I was integrally involved in the making of the local content, where even under the previous administration, we would have submitted at the private sector commission level, the private sector association level, we would have submitted, made written submissions to the authorities. And so when the policy came out, nothing was reflected what we submitted. But under the current government, all of our written submissions, they were reflected in the draft policies. There were different rounds of consultations. There were different revised drafts. And then we quickly moved to legislation. And so what is in that legislation largely is a reflection of what we as in the private sector of Guyana would have represented. Um, in particular, I must give credit to the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce in particular, which on the now Honorable Minister Indar, when he was president of the chamber, and the chamber's executive director Richard Rambaran, I have to give those guys credit because they're the ones who were the champion for local content back then. They were the ones who even drafted an entire legislation. And so all of the representation they made, they would have championed in particular what is the definition for a local content for a Guyanese company, right? Because you have what was happening or what could have happened. You have a foreign company could come and register in Guyana as a Guyanese company, but is that really a Guyanese company? So it was important to have a definition for what is a Guyanese company. So credit goes to the Chamber of Commerce in particular for that, and credit goes to the policymaker, the government, for taking that consideration seriously and having it incorporated into the policy and now into the legislation. So what defines a Guyanese company? So there are about 3 major criteria that you have to tick to be considered a Guyanese company. One, there has to be 51% ownership and control, Guyanese ownership and control. And the reason for that is because you have, in the absence of a legislation, you have foreign companies could come in and they just find a local partner just to front it, just to tick a box. And so being cognizant of that, the private sector said, no. We need real local content, real ownership, and real control. And so there's a 51% minimum, right, in the case of joint venture. And the executive management of that company has to be at least 75% of the top management has to be Guyanese. That's the minimum threshold. And then the staff has to be, the minimum threshold is 90%. So those are the definition to be considered a truly Guyanese company. And those are some key components that really make our local content act and our local content framework, something that is good and that will maximize the benefit for Guyana and Guyanese.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joel. I'll ask now our other guest, Mr. Bobby Gusai. He's close to the policymakers. In fact, he might be one of the policymakers on the petroleum side. So if you can add to what Joel has said, or if there's anything needs to be clarified, you can please do so. I would like you to comment on what progress has been made with the registry that the ministry is creating to register all local companies or local foreign-based companies in relation to local content.
Thank you very much for having me on the program, and thank you, Joel, for giving synopsis of activities that would have done over the last few years on local content. But the real work started in around November of 2020, when the president, as you said, would have appointed the advisory committee on that. And then the work proceeded into the Ministry of Natural Resources, undertaking that initial finding from that report and then developing an effective policy. And one thing which we must be very clear on is that this policy that was developed was done under national consultation through the guidance of the president himself in February of 2021. And at that event at the convention center here in Georgetown, the commitment was made to have a policy and move to legislation before the end of 2021. And that was done. And it was the role of myself and a few other persons here at the ministry who worked on that policy and had a systematic consultation with all groups in Guyana, all of the working groups in terms of those who are in the industry, those who are non-operational sectors as well, and also other interrelated government organizations. And around October, we would have proceeded into the drafting of the law itself, the bill, and that would have gone to Parliament in December, as we all know. And then on the last day of the year, the president signed that and put that into law. So it was a very fast-paced period to get the local content legislation operational. And of course, in the beginning of the year, we moved straight into the establishment of the Local Content Secretariat, which is the organization that will be driving the day-to-day activity of promoting local content to get companies to register, as well as persons who are interested in the oil and gas sector to be part of that database, where companies and persons themselves will have access to see what opportunities are available. So from policy into legislation, into institution being the Local Content Secretariat, and now into operationalization, it's where we have been working over the last couple of months. In terms of registration, what is happening now is that last week we announced that starting this week here, and some persons have already gone and made their appointment and started the registration process at the Secretariat itself. So what is happening is that you have to go into the Secretariat, and the staff there will guide you through the registration process. We understand that persons are very they're critical in the sense that they want to make sure that they get registered very quickly. But there's a host of documentation which you have to supply to us to verify that you are indeed a local company. And the staff of the Secretariat will walk you through those guidelines, which we are making public through the ministry website, to ensure that persons fully understand the role of the Secretariat and the ways in which you can be registered. So the registration is two-part. One is an employment register, where persons who are interested in being part of the oil and gas industry can submit their information and be registered to be considered by companies when they are looking for employees. The second part is for the supply of goods and services.
Do you have any data on the number of companies that are registered at the Secretariat?
Well, as I said, that registration process started this week. So by the end of this week, we will know how many persons have come in, and it will continue over time. In fact, it's a good point you raised there, and we have made this very public, that the register will be uploaded onto the website and be made public. So persons can see the number of companies that have been registered in Guyana as a local company, as well as the number of persons that are interested in being employed in the sector. The registration process took this format for varying reasons. One, of course, is security, and the other main one would be the magnitude of companies that want to be registered. But at the same time, we have to be careful to make sure that companies are true and fair in the information that they are provided to us. As Joel would have pointed out, there are certain criteria which a company who would like to say that they are a local company, they must be 51% owned by Guyanese, so that must be beneficial ownership. Their executive must be 75%, and the general staff must be 90% Guyanese. And we have to be careful of persons using certain type of loopholes through consultations with key organizations such as the Private Sector Commission, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, the Guyana Manufacturing Services Association, and others in Guyana. We would have learned that companies would have tried their very best to just have a figure in front to say that this is the Guyanese who own it, but really it is not owned by Guyanese persons. It's owned externally. The information that is needed to be supplied and provided for verification by the Local Content Secretariat will ensure that such activities are not happening within our register. So the register will have fully dedicated local Guyanese companies and persons. However, a point needs to be made here, though, that it is not only the companies or persons who are registered with the Local Content Secretariat are the ones who will be working in the oil and gas industry. we have made it very clearly that when we are going to be measuring local content at the end of the year, that there are going to be companies that are not on the register that are providing goods and services outside of that domain. That can still happen. So you will have your local content measurement and then the non-local content measurement as well. And what we want to do is to encourage those companies to find the right partner or joint venture and become a Guyanese company. Part of the purpose of the policy and the law was to ensure that we promote local business growth, local business development, and of course, ultimately to generate more revenues that would be within Guyana and be reinvested for Guyana. So it is a two-part approach, and we do know that there are a large number of persons and companies who are eager to be on that register and to be part of, to have their business be certified as a fully owned local company and can say that they are contributing towards the local economic benefits of Guyana.
Okay, there's a follow-up question. These companies that are registered, do they get any special tax concessions from the government? Or is the government considering any tax concessions to them?
Again, that's a good question. Of course, persons will want to know something like that. So what happens first is when companies coming in to do investment in Guyana, they would of course want to be able to talk to the Guyana Office for Investment to determine what are the incentives, what are the tax breaks, or whatever regime is in place to ensure that they benefit in the beginning. So the local content secretariat is coordinating with the Guyana Office for Investment, the Guyana Revenue Authority, the Ministry of Labor, as well as the other related business services governmental organization to make sure that these companies are identified fully as Guyanese companies. And where necessary, if they are coming in with a sort of investment, they can have their tax holidays or their tax breaks. So this is a coordinated effort from the Secretariat side. But to be on the register doesn't ultimately give you some sort of benefit or incentive, but that will be coordinated through the different organizations that are also providing the necessary ease of doing business services for Guyana.
All right. Thank you very much. We now move on to well-known businessman, Mr. Dave Narayan. I would like you to comment first of all. I know your number one love is cricket and sports entertainment. If you can make some general comments, and do you think that fits into the local content that's outside, or you think there's scope for that?
First of all, before I expand, Bobby, can I ask you two questions first, and I will answer that for Tara. Do we have a deadline for local content for companies, and do we have do we have penalty, and what are some of the penalty, and then maybe we can continue.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So from the law itself that we have in place, that companies have to submit their annual reports, their master plan. So let me explain those two. So the master plan is your 5-year plan that you would have when you're operating in Guyana, providing the company is one that sees themselves operating for 5+ years. So they will have to submit to us, to the government, to the local content secretariat, what is their proposed business plan and activities for 5 years. And then there's an annual plan. So what are you doing in the current year? And in those plans, the companies would have to set out 3 very critical components: their local capacity development plan, their employment plan, and their procurement plan. And within that, it would allow for the government to be able to fully determine what are the opportunities within the sector, or where we see ourselves over 1 year, 2 year, and into 5 years. Now, there are deadlines in submitting those plans. So at the start of the year, they would have about 40 days to submit the annual plan. And then they have about 90 days to submit the master plan. And then every 6 months, you have to submit an annual half-yearly report to show the progress of work that you have. If you don't, there are some penalties in there. When we were working with the the Minister of Legal Affairs and Attorney General on drafting of the bill, we had to determine what would be the penalties, and we had to make sure that it was in alignment with the penalties that are within the country. So there are financial penalties if you provide inaccurate information or false information on your company, and also there are other penalties that are laid out there that you can find yourself in imprisonment, or you can be subject to a certain level of penalty. So this goes for both persons and companies if they provide false information or they declare false information to the government in the verification of the data or of the information provided, or if they somehow misrepresent their company as being Guyanese, or someone being a Guyanese when they are not a Guyanese. So,
but do you have a deadline? Do you have a deadline for companies to register as a local content company?
No, we don't have a deadline, but it is every year we would want to make sure that companies that are coming into the country, new companies, are on the register. There is no deadline that say that you have to be on the register by this time. But because of the procurement opportunities and the employment opportunities that the register will provide for, it will be beneficial for companies to be on that register, and for persons who are seeking employment in the oil and gas sector to be on that register as well.
Thank you. First of all, I must apologize to the viewership that we had advertised Paul Chung, head of the Private Sector Commission, that he would be on this show, and we had announced his photograph, everything. And Bobby, you were not on it, and last minute Paul had a serious function to go to, and we asked you overnight last night to come on, so we could have not advertised it properly. But thanks for coming on, and we don't want to feel the viewership that we have announced Paul Chung as a wrong candidate, and you can, so thank you for Joel, thank you for Bobby for thing. Coming back to you, Dr. Tara.
Yes,
sports. I don't think it's local content, but you might want to add. What I'm trying to encourage might be, in Guyana, is to encourage folks to get involved with different type of sports, and cricket is one, and we recently added that in supporting boxing. The last boxing game there, Elton Dari, and we have just was approached to help the indigenous people of Region 4, the women football team, in some uniforms and so I feel that the little contribution that I can make to Guyana, the society, would help the people come out of poverty in a term if they can bring up sports. And we were watching the football game the other day. Youngster can make millions and multi-million into cricket, and so we can find talent. We can find talent, and from that we can encourage them, and then the other folks throughout the country can see them and get them involved. What we're doing presently for the first time, other than the under 15 cricket we've been supporting for years, this year, as soon as the rain stops, we sponsored the Guyana under 15. The Barbies second division competition. So we're looking to find also folks out of the Barbies division, the second division. Find folks who can play cricket that never have an opportunity, so they can find an opportunity in CPL or 2020 or Guyana cricket or Barbies cricket. So that's how I would say it. And then we are also sponsoring an Independence Cup, Albion versus Everest. So that's a little I'm doing. I'm not going to say local content.
So you're promoting local talent, not local content.
Right, local talent. Local talent.
Okay, so tell us how your business benefits from local content legislation.
Well, my business is an export business, Dr. Tara. It's not really benefiting as per se. I'm not working along with the oil and gas yet, supplying them, etc., doing any services as yet. And but basically, I'm helping local people there to produce and manufacture and get the products out of the local industry to overseas. So it's not maybe local content,
So,
but
so your company is not registered under the local
no,
content
no,
registration.
no. I'm not
Okay,
registered as a local content.
all right.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
I want to go
Dave,
back now
Dave,
to
I would recommend you though, Dave,
Joel, if
Dr.
you're
Taro,
there.
Well, if you recommend me, I will not now do it.
I would
Then.
recommend that Dave register, because whilst he would say his business is an export business, it's also a supply business. So
That's true.
more
That's true.
opportunities.
Right.
This question again is both for Joel and Mr. Gosai. There is a press release where the Private Sector Commission expressed its disenchantment with the CARICOM, some group from CARICOM. I can't recall the exact name, but they came and had some discussions with the president about local content, but the PSC was not happy because they didn't meet with the PSC. And some time ago, the same group was raising alarm that the local content legislation passed by Guyana is in contradiction with the Chaguaramas Treaty, the CSME, the Caribbean Common Market. And there was a big furor in the press and elsewhere. Now they seem to soften their position. But then the Public Sector Commission is not happy that they came to Guyana and didn't see them. And they have argued that this process of developing this document was over 12 months, and yet this CARICOM group didn't give an input at that time, and now they are coming at the 11th hour to raise some concerns or hurdles. So, Joel, if you can please address that, and then we move on to Bobby.
All right. That is an important question, Dr. Tara Singh. For me to answer that question adequately, for the benefit of your viewers, I think it is important for me to give a little bit of background. And that background is, again, I have to go back to 2015 when oil was discovered, the announcement was made. We Guyanese, all of us here, has no experience in oil and gas. We know nothing about the industry, and so what has happened? The oil and gas sector is a global industry, and it doesn't wait for you to build capacity, right? So Trinidad, who has been in the industry for more than 100 years, has more than 100 years experience. We have a lot of Trinidadians who are coming in, and a lot of services were provided from out of Trinidad, and you have Trinidad companies coming into Guyana. And at one point, there was an instance where the energy chamber in Trinidad, and this is under the previous government and encouraged under the previous government, they were looking to set up a branch of their Chamber of Commerce in Guyana, in complete isolation from the local private sector, without speaking to the local private sector or the leadership. Now, typically, I've been a part of the private sector for quite a while. And typically, when foreigners come to this country looking for business opportunities, any other part of the world, the first thing they do, they learn about the country, who are the major stakeholders and organizations who they need to speak with. And one of the first organizations they come to is the Private Sector Commission and the other chambers and so on. So these guys from this chamber, the Trinidadian chamber, they were looking to form their own chamber without talking to us, And so we didn't like that. And that's how the Guyana Oil and Gas Energy Chamber was formed, right? When we realized what was happening. That's by Mr. Mani Ramprasad. So with that same attitude, right? I'm not saying that this is the case for all Trinidadians, right? But it is true for a small group. Now, when the CPSO, the CARICOM Private Sector Organization was formed, that organization was formed in 2020. And when you study, you read about it and read the memorandum and all the documents and the bylaws, you understand that that body was intended to be like an apex private sector body for CARICOM. Now, I could relate to what is an apex body because the Private Sector Commission, for example, in Guyana, is the apex private sector body for Guyana. And so what makes it the apex body? It is an umbrella body where you have several different other business support organizations and chambers of commerce, most of which are sector specific. For example, Georgetown Chamber of Commerce has its own, mandate and deal with specific issues. You have the Tourism and Hospitality Association deal with the tourism sector and that sector. The Guyana Manufacturing and Service Association is for the manufacturing and services sector. Then Gold and Diamond and a whole host of others. And then you have regional chambers in Berbice, in West Demerara, in Linden, in Latham, and so on. So the council, right, or the governing council of the Private Sector Commission is made up of the heads of all those different associations. And so that's why it's called an apex association. And then from that council, you have an executive. So it represents all of the associations, and the distinction of the Private Sector Commission from all the others is it deals with national cross-cutting issues. So while the chamber would deal with specific matters, GMSA would deal with specific matters to their sector, at the commission level, at the Private Sector Commission level, it deals with matters and policies that affects all sector, cross-cutting, right? So one would imagine that the CPSO, when you read the bylaws and so forth, it was intended to have a similar structure. The only difference is this is for CARICOM, the entire CARICOM region. And so when you look at the group, when you understand this matter, and the group that is controlling the CPSO at the executive level is a group of executives of some of the regional conglomerates. And so powerful conglomerates, of course. And so it is not reflective. The institutional composition is not reflective of the entire CARICOM private sector. And there has been a lot of complaints from other countries, member countries, because when they issued that challenge, when that email got leaked, I was part of a meeting with the Energy Chamber. We met with the CARICOM Secretary General, and she said to us that other countries' private sector complain that they are not represented at the CPSO level. And so the problem with that is you have a small group of powerful companies hijacking or having the dominant power, influence, and control of the CPSO. And naturally, you could say whatever you want to say, but naturally, those who understand how the private sector and business work, not only in Ghana, but in the Caribbean, they put their interest first. They advance their interest first, right? If you speak with other, I'm sorry, Paul Chung is not here, but if you speak with other private sector leaders who've been involved in intra-regional trade matters and these type of stuff over all these years, they would give you a whole host of specific examples of problems we've had. So the bottom line is the CPSO, what a private sector commission was contending, and I would have written before, is the institutional composition. Is it reflective of what it was supposed to be? So that is one thing. And the other thing is, if they have a problem with the Local Content Act, what was stopping them The ministry, the government has had an open door policy. There is CARICOM. I have never seen a government since I know myself in this country and have been, going to school and live through and understand the different election cycle and change in government. I have never seen a government more accessible at the highest level than the government of the day. Never. In the last 5 years, I have never seen the president. The former president, I have never seen him in person. I've never met him. I never shook his hand. I don't know what he looks like, if he's real in person or whether he's a cardboard, right? The current president, I see him almost so frequently. I meet him so frequently. I'm at State House, at different functions on private sector really so frequently. I've never happened in the last 5 years. And this is the case for anybody else. So why wasn't the CPSO, they were paying attention, obviously, with what was going on all this time. Why didn't they even simply write a letter to the Ministry of Natural Resources or ask for a meeting? Bobby, you could confirm after I'm finished. Did the CPSO ever write the ministry for a meeting or present a submission? So that's the second thing. They never consulted. The composition of the CPSO is hijacked, right? I would say it's hijacked. That's my word, not the private sector.
Can I ask you a question? What's CARICOM position on the status of the CPSO?
So
have CARICOM made a ruling, or would they inquire into the constitutional structure of this body, whether it's representative of the various CARICOM territories?
Well, when we met with CARICOM, what was said to us, and what I've read when I studied the formation of the CPSO is an affiliate organization of CARICOM, right? But it functions independent of CARICOM, as in the CARICOM Secretariat, right? So the CARICOM Secretariat doesn't really have any control in the day-to-day, functioning of it. And I think when the leadership of CARICOM, the Honorable Mia Motley, at the time when the CPSO was formed, when she, gave the approval for the formation of the CPSO, that was not what was intended. They were supposed, you can't expect her to go and see that they do the right things, because it functions independently, but it is an affiliate of CARICOM. Now, if you ask me, to give an opinion on what I think now, CARICOM at the political leadership level, when you look at the sequence of events, that posture, the email was leaked, the private sector of Guyana, had a resounding and overwhelming condemnation of it. Then they tried to massage it, they tried to do damage control. They had a meeting with the CARICOM, and then you had a meeting of the CARICOM heads, and then recently, I think there was an event in one of the CARICOM countries where the leadership, they neutralized the whole thing. They neutralized the whole thing, and so the CPSO now had to get in line with that, where the leadership of CARICOM was saying that, look, we're not going to challenge the Local Content Act for Guyana. So they neutralized the entire thing. So the position of CARICOM at the political leadership level, I don't think the intention is to challenge the Local Content Act. And if you ask me, does the act prevent our CARICOM counterparts from participating? The answer is no. The act, the legislation caters for partnership, and that's how you're going to build capacity. It caters for joint venture partnerships. That's how you have the 51-49 formula. But you see, arguably, people want to be greedy. They want everything, but that's a different matter. The bottom line is that the act the framework does not prevent, it does not deprive anybody or any other country from participating in the sector, right? In fact, the act promotes, partnership, right?
All right, thank you. Let's go on to Mr. Bobby Gusai to offer his comments on that, if any.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Just a few comments in addition to what Joel would have mentioned there. When we were developing the policy and the legislation, we took extensive consultation. And as I said earlier, we also met with our related government organization, and one of those were the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. And the very subject matter that arose several months ago about CARICOM, the CMSE, the role of our local content law, and how it would impact on the region's development, and Guyana being part of this region, were the issues we explored. And we explored those issues primarily because Guyana is part of the CMSE. We are part of CARICOM. But for decades, CARICOM has been trying to move to a common market and a single economy. We are still not really in a common market. There are some level of free movement of people and to some extent capital, but not in the ways in which we would like it to be. And we don't have to look very far to see that. Neighboring countries that are not very far away from Guyana, we can see those differentials in how movements between inflow and outflow of people and capital are being dealt with. And we don't have an economic union in the CARICOM region where countries coordinate their national economic policies for beneficial ownership, for comparative advantage, and for competitive advantage. We don't do that. So our law is not a protectionist law. It is one that promotes business growth. And as I stated earlier, the law doesn't prevent anybody from coming in and setting up and wanting to provide a service that local companies cannot provide. We know that over the next 10 years, and this is why when we were drafting the policy, we had put in the Section 7 of that policy different tiers for 10 years. We have a starting period, year 3, year 5, year 7, and year 10 of targets we want to meet. And it is for those reasons, when we were developing the law, we only identified 40 areas for economic benefits at the start point. 40 different sectors and subsectors of goods and services that are to be provided in country. And we started those areas based on consultation again, in terms of the capacity that we have. So we will see that you have other companies coming in and providing those services that we aren't able to provide as yet. But again, we go back to the role and function of the law, which is to promote business growth and to promote more companies registering in Guyana. So when the CPSO had made their statement, and we at the Ministry of Natural Resources, as Joel asked, were never consulted when we were doing this. They know the law was coming. It was publicized. The policy was publicized. The law was dealt with in the public. Everybody knew that Guyana was moving from policy to law. There are only a handful of countries around the world that would have done that. Most countries have a policy and they leave it like that. But a policy will not allow for effective change unless you have the driving mechanism of a law. So the law will allow for the objectives of the policy to be achieved. And we developed the law not because we want to lock out anybody, but we know that the fast pace of which Guyana sector, the petroleum sector, was growing, that we needed to make sure that the local companies that could provide any goods or services must be able to be part of that equation. It has been stated several times over that the rate of pace from discovery to development is one of the fastest in the world, if not the fastest in the world. We are on our second learning curve right now, which I like to say. The first was preparing for oil and gas. Now we are an oil and gas economy where we are producing and exporting, and businesses are here. They are growing. They're seeing the benefits of being in Guyana. And this local content law is something which was welcomed by everybody. When I say everybody, the international players as well as the local private investors were happy to have this. So it was a bit shocking at that time, but we now see where that conversation from the CPSO is going, and we do understand now that I don't think there's a challenge out there currently, but there will always be certain factors that will come up and elements that will be there to try to challenge something, but there's no effective challenge to Guyana having a law for Guyana's benefit.
All right, thank you very much, Joel. You have 2 minutes in which to answer this question. Now, I know you're the managing director of a big Guyanese company called TriStar. How do they feel about local content? If you can tell us in 2 minutes.
Well, I'll tell you in the shortest possible term. Local content benefits everybody, right? The owner for TriStar, he hailed from the West Coast, and so he's a very passionate guy about giving back to the community, and so that development is in line with transforming development on the West Demerara, on West Coast, and on West Bank, which would create hundreds of job opportunities and on the entire supply chain. So local content for us is a good thing. It has a stream of benefits with it in terms of creating employment, driving other industries, driving the entire supply chain and value chain, right? So in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you. Now we will give each one of you 2 minutes for closing statement, whatever you want to say about local content or any other issues. So we'll start with Joel, then we move on to Gosai, then to Dave.
All right. So
Joel, go ahead.
First, I want to say, use this forum to say publicly to thank the government of Guyana for their business friendly approach and welcoming approach and accommodative posture to accommodate the complaints, the representation of the private sector, and taking it right up to the policy level, to the legislation level. And from where I sit, I can say as well that there is an ongoing, engagement between private sector and the government at the ministry level, at Bobby's level, and the secretariat to now help with the implementation. There are a number of issues coming up on a daily basis, and I must say that the secretariat is very, very willing and accommodative to help solve those issues. So I want to say, let's continue, and here I'm speaking on behalf of the entire private sector, to the government, to Bobby. Let's continue to work, in the manner in which we have started off to make this thing work. And I'm pleased to see that the ministry is embarking upon an assessment very soon to see how the local content has worked. I'm very eager to see that, because whenever the whole point of local content is to maximize the value. And so when I look at local content spend in the economy from 2015 to 2021, before the legislation, the local content spend only accounts for less than 10% of the revenue generated from oil production. And so with this local content act and what is in there and the way in which it will benefit the private sector, that spend is going to increase to 20%, 30%, and that is the intention. That's how we maximize value for us. So thank you for having me here, Dr. Singh, to be part of this.
You're welcome, and we are happy to have you here.
And it's,
and now to
thank
Bobby.
you. And it's always good to share a panel with my very brilliant colleague and hardworking colleague and friend, Bobby, soon to be Dr. Bobby Gusai. Hustle up and finish your PhD,
Right.
Bobby.
Okay, closing remarks, Bobby.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Dr. Singh. Just a couple of key points. The local content legislation is a dynamic piece of document that is guiding the process for development of businesses in Guyana. And I say dynamic because, as Joel would say, we are going to be doing an assessment. We want to generate various reports to see how local content is contributing to the economy and how it is growing. Earlier, Joel mentioned that our economy was about $4 billion US. That's around 2019. In today, our economy is 8.7 billion US dollars. We have doubled, and more than 50% of that comes from the petroleum sector and related sectors of the oil and gas industry. And local content is going to allow for the continuous generation of more income to the economy. And we want to be able to measure that and show how local content and the oil and gas sector is contributing. By the end of this year, we are going to do an assessment. That assessment is not only going to show where we are with local content, but how we can update the legislation itself by respective regulations. So what we want to do is to look at those 40 areas and the targets that we have there and see how we can modify that for the second year. When I say modify, it means what additional goods and services that we can add to that list of 40 that can allow for more companies to see opportunities in the local economy that we have here. And of course, the local content law itself is not in isolation. It is in a way linked to the recently passed NRF, because as the NRF continues to build out, we want to make sure that more revenues are generated within the country that could contribute to our sovereign wealth fund, so to speak. So, and we are also trying to see different areas of improvement from businesses, from consultation, private sector commission, Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, and the GMSA are three of the main organizations. But also we do have the other representative of countries and international organizations that we are working with to see how we can get more businesses aligned with our objectives and goals in the local content legislation. So you will be seeing more of the work that is being done in the coming months. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now we pass on to Dave for your closing remarks.
Thank you guys for being on the panel. On the business level, many Guyanese felt that before the local content came, that the foreigners, and especially the Trinidadians, not to take them alone, they were having all the services to the oil and gas company, and some still feel, especially the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce is voicing it every day. They still feel that they can offer the services, yet the services are being offered to the foreign company, especially the Trinidadians, who you said they were 100 years in the field. I saw a lot of CARICOM president or prime minister go to Guyana, and they're trying to align themselves with our president and the government. But I could say on behalf of an exporter of Caribbean, my company named Dave West Indian Import from USA, I export from the Caribbean. And I'm faced with a lot of difficulty, but I'm not going to talk about me. I'm going to talk about Guyanese. To take the president goes to Guyana from Suriname. Up to now, the Guyanese fishermen in the Berbice area, they're faced. They cannot get a simple fishing license because of some political issue there in Suriname. You know, we still have an issue there. In Trinidad, we have numerous issues. You can't take simple things like coconut water, honey, number of fruits and vegetables to Trinidad. Barbados, our prime ministers are so friendly, but the prime minister, the president, they know, but you leave it to the ministry. That's when you get the problem with the ministry. Barbados, you gotta get cycle certificate and all these things. Jamaica, you gotta get fishing license to take in a piece of fish in the suitcase. And I can go on and on. I have 2 minutes. So how do we address these? We are trying to be friendly, yet these countries are not yet to be friendly to Guyanese and Guyanese product. Dr. Tara, you want to comment on that before you go?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you. Those are important points. Trade is based on reciprocity in the Caribbean Common Market. In theory, there should be no tariff barriers. You should have equal access. Hopefully, the policymakers can work at this. I just want to remind our audience that this is an independent program, not connected to government, though we promote the country's development. We promote the people of Guyana. We promote anything good. Our views are based on evidence and facts, not propaganda. That is the reason why, for this particular program, we do not invite people who are known propagandists. We need experts, people who can argue with facts and reason, rationality. And we want to thank our two guests. They are two brilliant Guyanese. We are happy to have them, and we wish them all the best. I know we'll have them again on this program, and I think our next program will be we interview Minister Indar and one of the leading civil engineers in Guyana, Professor Maniram Budu, will be moderating that with Dr. Ganga Ramdas, who was a former head of the Department of Economics and Information Technology at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. Once again, we thank our viewers and thank our panelists, Joel Bagwandin, Bobby Gusai, Dave Narayan, and our technical staff here. Have a good night. God bless you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.